Okay, do you mind if I ask you a couple more questions about sort of exorcism?
Go ahead,
things? Okay, so how did you end up becoming an exorcist?
I came from a very psychic family. My father and grandmother, and perhaps before that, were into this kind of thing. It's not something I would have chosen to do, but it was something that developed and was thrust on me. At school, as a young boy, I could see things that others couldn't. And I was put into a Catholic orphanage run by nuns. And firstly, I used to use my left hand, which they said was the hand of the devil. And secondly, I could give readings in the playground to children in the playground. This set me on a course with the nuns there for continual beatings, scoldings, lies and harassment. I left school and I already had some degree of fame, and I went to the Spiritualist Church, and they said I was very well guarded, and they said I would be ideal for an exorcist. And I went into training, long training, to be a freelance exorcist.
Fantastic. So you trained or you worked with, or both, with the Chief Exorcist for the Church of England?
I won't say I trained with him, but I watched him work many times. We discussed things and I learned from him. The Reverend Christopher Neil Smith was an amazing man. He was so fast in what he did, and once a month he would have all the people who believed they were possessed. They weren't all possessed, but they believed they were, and he would work through them very quickly, and I learned a lot from him. I was also introduced by Father Kenneth Green to the Catholic Chief Exorcist, Dom Robert Pettit-Pierre. He did some fantastic work in royal residence. He even secretly went to Russia to exorcise the Lubyanka prison, where many people were just murdered for the sake of it. Don Robert Pettit-Pierre was a very holy man, as one has to lead a special kind of life to be an exorcist. And yes, sir, I learnt from them all. I felt it was my duty and my path. As I say, it's not something I would have chosen, but it was thrust onto my shoulders, and I did the best I could.
Right, fantastic. So, were these exorcisms through the Spiritualist Church, or?
Most of them were, certainly at the beginning. I was chosen for this, and I went through a certain amount of training there. But as my fame grew over the years, I would get a lot of calls from people outside of the church. One of the problems was Christianity was going through changes, and it was only available to regular churchgoers to use the church for marriages, baptisms and everything. So people had no choice but to look outside for freelance exorcists.
Could you talk us through the process of what it is you used to do?
The most important thing is what's called the backgrounding. This is the training and the exercises one has to do, the purification rituals before one goes to see what one's going to find. There are so many different variables. There's no standard scenario. One has to take things very much by ear, and sometimes they can be very different. In the case of the famous Piggott's Warehouse haunting, that turned out to be very different than what I was told. There was no evil there at all. It was a man who was repairing the skylight at the top of the warehouse. He fell through and was killed, and his ghost haunted the place. But the way it was put to me was that it was demonic, it was evil. It was not. It was just an ordinary dead man. So you don't really know what you're going to get until you get there. The exorcist for the Diocese of Chelmsford was a man called Father Kenneth Green. Now, I worked with him quite a bit, and he told me of the Bishop Wall case. What that was, there was a group of teenagers after a party in Stratford Tower Block. They decided to play around with a Ouija board. Certain things happened in the flat before I was called. I came along to find Bishop Wall was there. Bishop Wall came out straight away, and he was struggling with this youngster who had got beard up and got a few drugs inside him and had been taken over. And he was struggling with him, and this boy, his feet came off the ground, and there was a desperate struggle there. Bishop Wall became very unwell, and he left. I stayed on there really to quieten the youngsters down, and I heard from Father Kenneth Green that Bishop Wall he went grey overnight almost. Within 2 or 3 weeks, the beast inside this boy had drained him so much that he went grey, and he became very ill. And to look at the man, he was as white as a sheet.